Please welcome to the stage Nicole Goodkind of Barron's and our esteemed panel.
Good afternoon and Shana Tova, Happy Jewish New Year. In a world where the demand for both affordable energy and credible climate solutions is rising, the path forward requires innovation, smart policy, cooperation across sectors, and we're here to explore how businesses and countries with competitive advantages can lead the way, not only to meet this demand, but also to create a new global standard for energy efficiency and carbon accountability. So I'm joined here by three exceptional leaders from government, academia, and industry. We have Brittany Kelm, she's the Senior Policy Advisor with the National Energy Dominance Council. We have Professor Karthik Ramanna from the University of Oxford's Blavatnik School of Government and the co-founder of the E-Ledgers Institute. And we have Vijay Swarup, he's the Senior Director of Climate Strategy and Technology at ExxonMobil Corporation. So we have a packed 18 minutes for discussion, and let's get right into it. So let's kick this off. This is for all of you, but we'll start with you, Brittany. The title of our panel mentions competition as a key driver. Let's explore that. What is the single most important tool, be it a policy, a technology, or a market mechanism that can help unlock greater competition to achieve both our energy needs and our climate goals?
I think it's a known regulatory policy framework, clear and simple.
Okay, would you care to expand on that a little bit?
We need to know, everyone in a private sector environment, what are we working with, whether that is more regulation or less, it just needs to be known.
Okay. How about for you?
Yeah, I mean, well, the United States has this advantage when it comes to its manufacturing efficiency. In fact, the president talked about that at the UN this morning. And we need to find a way to basically capitalize on that. We need to find a way to trade on that, right? It's like we've got this unpriced advantage, and it's crazy that we're not building on it. So if we can build into our global system a way to reward our companies for their energy efficiency, that would be part of, I think, what we can do.
Doctor?
I guess I'm using this. Yeah, look, it comes down to policy and technology. And if you can get those two working together, then magic can happen, and that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, so let's continue with you then. What do policymakers need to get right, so to speak, from a corporate perspective here to drive investment and enable further energy development to meet growing demand, but while also recognizing other societal needs?
Yeah, look, I think the first thing is clarity. So the clearer the policy, the more you can get there. But maybe the more important thing is policy has to have line of sight to a market, because you cannot policy forever. And technology has to have line of sight to scale, because what people forget about this industry is just the scale, the enormity of this system. And so a solution is not sufficient if it isn't a scalable solution. A policy is not sufficient if it doesn't drive market formation. And once you get the markets and the technology working, then the rest takes care of itself.
And Brittany, it looks like you might want to jump in there. From your perspective, from a government perspective, what policy levers are the most effective in attracting private sector investment?
Well, what you've seen from our president is a big push on deregulating and finding whatever hurdles were in the way. And you've seen this across all the agencies. And so as we sit at the National Energy Dominance Council, that's where we're able to then look across all the departments and agencies that impact energy development, not just DOE, not just DOI or EPA, because we all have to work together. And then you have FERC and other regulatory bodies in that capacity. And so it has been what red tape was existing that was preventing private sector from being able to get certain technologies and investments built, and so then continuing on that path. But then something very true to everyone on the stage then is, if we are creating this really great deregulated environment in the US, we have to make sure, because in energy dominance, we need to make sure these energies can go globally into our allies. And so Where then are there complications perhaps out of EU regulations or something that is shooting ourselves in the foot and where we're having to look at it more broadly? So that's something we're doing constantly.
You got ahead of me and you jumped to my next question for you, which is really, from a policy perspective, what's the biggest hurdle to getting these new kind of complex energy projects, let's say a nuclear plant or a carbon capture pipeline approved and built in a timely manner, timely being the key word?
Permitting. And so once again, goes back to how and why we were created as a White House entity for energy projects, was nothing is ever one permit, not one agency, and then of course you have federal permits and then you have state permits, and it's having to make sure we can get all of those lined up to where private sector can actually get shovels in the ground. And so we're constantly finding, of course, with nuclear, like being a newer form of energy that not new, but something that we're getting momentum behind now, where are those hurdles and where are we having to unstick permits? And so then sometimes when you're dealing with a pipeline and it's Clean Water Act, you're dealing with a state 401. And then that's different state by state. So we're really having to work all of those angles to be able to give private sector true investment certainty, but that's what we're doing on a daily basis sitting at NEDC.
Karthik, I see you nodding along. I want to ask you about technology, but do you have something to add there, or are you just agreeing?
Well, no, I wanted to pick up on something Brittany said, which I think is really important, which is the global consistency of this approach, right? I mean, the challenge is that if you set sensible rules in one part of the world, but then you've got in other parts of the world, companies have to jump through hoops, or inconsistent in some sense. You have to do X here and you have to do the opposite of X in another part of the world. That just makes no sense. I mean, it's a lose-lose for everyone involved. So I think one of the nice things that we should probably work toward in the course of the next few years is that global harmonization. And again, I think several people have picked up on this notion that European energy policy over the course of the last few years has deindustrialized Europe by moving so much production to other parts of the world. But it did it in the purported name of decarbonization. But what it ended up doing was actually increasing the pollution around the world, because it moved production from sort of high efficiency sites to low efficiency sites. And so if we have a consistent global approach to this, we really address the problem, which is we need to have an abundant supply of energy to meet global demand. And we need to do it in a way that addresses all the other priorities here, including, we want to have a competitive advantage on our decarbonization prowess priced in to the way we trade. So, yeah.
And so you're coming to us from across the pond. You're based in Oxford. The rest of us are based here in the U.S. I'm not going to ask you to solve this problem, but you just presented it to us. What are some potential solutions that you're seeing?
I think that perhaps one promising way in which we can build momentum over the course of the next few years is to harness on this trend to build a carbon border assessment. The carbon border assessments that Europe have considered as a first version haven't really worked for all the reasons I mentioned. But I think there is a recognition that needs to be relooked at. And here again, there's this unpriced advantage with American clean manufacturing, clean energy, clean coal, and that needs to be priced in. So creating a regime that recognizes companies that have that efficiency, rewards them, allows them to compete for it, that would be something I think we could do. And the United States and Europe can lead on that. In fact, if the United States did it, Europe would very quickly follow. And and if the United States and Europe did it together, I mean, effectively the rest of the world would comply very, very quickly.
So I've said this already, but we've got government, industry, and academia / technology, right? Is that fair? All here on this stage. It seems like partnership is the solution. And I'm wondering, if we can maybe strike a positive note and maybe go down the line and talk about a recent example or some example of partnership that worked exceptionally well, and maybe about what made it so successful. And we can start with you, Doctor.
Well, look, I think this is a collaboration industry. But let's just start there. I mean, energy, when you want to get into energy, you don't get a degree in energy. It is the combination of every science, of every engineering, of every social science, of economics, of everything. So it all takes everything. So the collaboration is inherent in energy. And it is the one thing that cuts across every part of society. Yet there's 2 billion people that don't have access to energy. So the collaborations, I mean, we can go down a list of examples, but collaborations in our industry, if you look at big offshore projects, if you look at big almost anything, it's almost always collaborative. If you look at research, it's almost always some part of an academic plus a national lab plus industry, with everybody knowing their role. Right? The ultimate goal is scale. But fundamentals have to lead to scale. And so the role of the universities is the fundamentals, the role of the national labs and the startups is that first deployment, and the role of corporations like ours is to get it to scale, because the other abundant means scale. And so the more you can unlock the abundant energy, you can get that energy to the people that desperately want it, because I'll say one last thing. Rule 1 in energy is meet demand. It's a depletion industry. The minute you've used the energy, you gotta go find it again. And so we've got to keep looking for more, and so abundancy is what's needed to meet growing demand.
One area where I think the collaboration has been quite successful, maybe a little too successful, is AI. I think the government has rightly recognized that this is a national priority and that we need to drive quickly, we need to win this race, and it has done a phenomenal job empowering American businesses to be able to compete in this space, compete not just with each other, but more importantly globally. I say perhaps too successful only with the slight caveat that we might be entering a bit of an AI bubble. I think one of the things that the market is struggling to figure out is, do the valuations in AI really make sense? Because where is the demand going to be to justify the capacity we've created? So that's something that we still need to figure out. But I think, at least from the perspective of business, government, and technology, or the academic sector collaborating, AI is a classic win case that we've documented even in the last 6 months.
In the energy industry, yeah. Brittany?
I mean, on any of these, I can go on and on where there's so many overlaps, but AI specifically, you just saw we led Secretary Burgum as chairman of the NEDC on his first international trip. And what did we do in Italy? We signed a joint communique. It was on US LNG, but then on AI energy. Everyone is wanting to be in on the AI energy side. And you had already seen, we did an AI energy MOU with Israel. So you're just seeing so much demand there. And then that's a really good example where can we power it right now? We can go to the EMP producer, and that can be the natural gas pipeline to power it. And then you pull in the SMRs and the nuclear side. And so there's so many ways here. It's a really good point for collaboration and having to provide energy because everyone wants it and everyone wants us to win the AI race. And then just a fun one I'll pull together for us on collaboration as well. We got together briefly as speakers last week, and I was currently working on the EPA for Class 6 primacy for Exxon, CCUS well in Texas. So just an example of what we do at the NEDC and how we're very collaborative with our partners. But.
Yeah, Vijay and the rest of you were talking about how the energy transition is often discussed in terms of big infrastructure projects scaling, and of course it is. But I guess my question is, what about the workforce? What new skills are needed with these big jumps and changes we've been discussing, AI, and how can we ensure that the next generation of workers and this current generation of workers is prepared to meet the demands of this rapidly changing energy landscape? You've all kind of commented on this, but Brittany, based on your role in the government, I'd love to talk to you about it first.
So for workforce, we're definitely supportive of knowing that we need it there to be able to power these new energies. But then a lot of it's just natural overlap where we're not seeing any gaps, or that's not being something really issued to us. But then if you look at, for example, going into geothermal, you're able to use a lot of the same technology and expertise that you've had from upstream oil and gas, for example. But highly supportive in developing our workforce to continue on this new AI piece, for example.
And Professor, I'm assuming you work with a lot of the next generation. I mean, what are you hearing? How are you changing? I mean, things are changing so rapidly. I imagine AI is a problem, not just, or it's a big problem with students in many regards?
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't see it as a problem. I see it as something that empowers people to do what they need to do, and always use technology to do the job you want to do, rather than find a job for the technology because it's there. And many people get that wrong. And so I don't know whether I should be proud of this, but I've never used any generative AI because I have no use for it. Why would I mean, in my work, which is knowledge creation, why would I need it? So I do use things like Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel. They're useful tools. So the technology serves me rather than me serving the technology. And this is my advice to anyone. If you have a legitimate use, and there's a lot of legitimate uses for generative AI, then please go ahead and use it. But don't use it just because it's there. So in our role as a university, and my employer's been around for 1,000 years, so we're older than the Aztec Empire, we're older than the Great Plague, et cetera. And you say, in our work, we are training, to paraphrase Drew Faust, we are training carpenters to be citizens, not citizens to be carpenters. And so the kind of knowledge that we want people to think about is, how to think about problems, what problems to think about, not, here's the skill, et cetera, that might depreciate in the next 6 months. So that kind of critical thinking is what then empowers you to be really successful, what you do. So I'm all for AI and the use of AI and empowering people's lives, but use it to the extent that it actually makes your life better. Don't use it just because it's there, is what I say.
But are you training students on?
They're training themselves. We don't need to train them to use AI, right? And so that's not why they come to Oxford, how to use ChatGPT. They figured that out, so.
But also to use new technologies in the industry.
Yes, yeah. In fact, we want them to develop the next generation of technologies. That's what we want them to do, right? So, and so we need them to understand what's happening sort of under the hood at a fundamental level, rather than to be consumers of the technology. We want them to be producers of the technology, inventors for the next generation.
Yeah. Vijay, I'm curious, behind the big headlines, what specific technological or policy milestones, if you want to jump in, do we need to hit in the next 5 to 10 years to truly accelerate the energy transition? And I'm curious if there's a breakthrough you're watching that the public may not be aware of yet.
I just want to make sure he's real.
Yeah.
You're not
See,
sure it's not Karthik AI over here. Well, look, what are we working on? We believe in taking our capabilities and using them to the best ability we can use our capabilities. We're a molecule company. We're a company of chemists and physicists and engineers, and so we take molecules and turn them into higher value. And so that's what we're doing today. We're taking molecules out of the barrel of oil and turning them into high-performance polymers, to turning into graphite, to turning them into materials for the future. If you think about energy, which energy is nothing more than the ability to do work. And so AI just allows you to do more work, just like a calculator allowed you to do more work. And 1,000 years ago at your university, probably the abacus was a huge breakthrough, okay? And so that's going to allow us to do that. It comes down to 3 capability areas that are going to make the difference. Materials, we're going to need new catalysts, new membranes, all enhanced by AI and things like that. You're going to need processes. So what are the new processes of the future that are going to be used? And then the final thing is computing. So AI is still kind of linear computing, but quantum computing is on the cusp of coming. So in each one of those 3, we are watching, we are researching, we're looking. If you know the breakthrough is coming, it's not a breakthrough. So we're constantly looking for those incremental magical steps that are going to collectively lead to the breakthrough.
So we have about 1 minute left here. I'd love to hear from each of you. One final go around. What's the one thing, and we'll keep it to one thing, that gets you most excited about the future of energy production? And we can start with you and go down the line.
Well, I'm horribly biased. It's always technology.
Yeah.
There's always more to do.
Yeah, I think there's $1 trillion industry in direct air capture, carbon capture and storage, things like that. That's on the cusp of creating enormous value across the world, and energy companies are actually leading in that technology. And energy companies in the United States, in particular, are leading on that technology and creating the conditions that unleash that $1 trillion market. I'd like to see that happen soon.
And Brittany, what's most exciting to you?
I mean, in this capacity, working for USG and the federal government, I get to wake up every day and I have our allies coming to me wanting our natural gas, our LNG that we're producing here, and I get to tell them, no, we have the supply and we can get it to you. And then on top of that, we are getting our adversary, well, those who were getting Russian gas, for example, like we're able to get them off. And I can totally do that by leveraging our private sector partners.
Great.
Thank you so much to our esteemed panel.
Thank you.
Thanks.